Today we're going to make a bunch of different wire wrapped Christmas wine charms. We're making the star, candy cane, heart, snowflake, Christmas tree and icicle. I popped some beads onto mine just for a little bit of colour, but these are really just ideas. You can make whatever shapes or colours that you like. To start with, we make our little circle loops, so that's what you pop your charms on to attach them onto the wine glass. So obviously for these designs we need 6 of them, and to make each little loop we need about 4 inches of the 20 gauge wire. You can also use 18 gauge, it's a little bit stronger, but I only have 20 gauge here today. So we just wrap our little 4-inch piece of wire around something round, something that's about the size of the little ring that you want, just so that these little tail end pieces kind of overlap. So wrap it around nice and tight, and then one end I bring back on itself, and then the other end I bend towards the other wire. So one goes upwards, one goes sideways. That way you make this little connection here, and you can just bend them around each other. So you can pop your little charms on there and pop it onto the wine glass. You want these charms to not be too long or they're going to go off the end. You want to be able to pop your wine glass down without it having a little charm go underneath or anything like that. So I try and have my charms about 1 inch tall, and that seems to be a good size to just sit on the bottom of your wine glass. I'm going to start with the Christmas tree, and for this one here we use about 6 inches of a 20 gauge dead soft silver wire. And we start on one end just by making a little loop at the top there. So I just leave a little piece straight and wrap one loop around our round nose pliers, and then that little piece that we left straight at the top, we just bring that around the wire there and crimp it in nice and tight so that it's nice and secure. Now we can start to form our little Christmas tree. So remember, I like them to be about 1 inch long. So I just measure sort of down one side, a little bit under 1 inch, and then just make a bend for the bottom of the tree. And then making a few more bends in the bottom here just for a little trunk on the bottom of your tree, and then back up the other side. Trying to make a nice even looking tree. Once you've brought that wire back up to the top, you can wrap it around underneath that top loop a couple of times and then cut your tail off. Crimping that wire in so there's no sharp pieces and just straightening everything up. So you should have your first little charm here, a nice even looking Christmas tree. I do like to put some beads onto my charms for colour, but that's totally optional, and I'll show you towards the end how I wire wrap the beads on there. But we're going to make all our little charms first. So we're on to the next one now, which is the little star charm. For this one here I use about 7 inches of the 20 gauge silver wire. We start again with making a little loop at the end, leaving that little end piece straight, wrapping it around our round nose pliers, and then bringing that little tail around the other wire and crimping it down, making sure there's no sharp edges there. And then we're going to start on our star. I like to measure about 1 inch from the bottom of the loop there, and then I just make a nice strong bend. Then we measure another inch along and put another bend, and then another inch and another bend, and another inch and another bend. So you can start to see the little star is forming, and then you should be almost at a point where you can bring that wire back to the top. I like to bring it around the back side just so it's sort of holding that star in place. But when you've made all your little bends and it's looking like a star, just bring your wire back to the top and wrap it around underneath that little loop there a couple of times, and then cut your tail off and crimp it in nice and tight so there's no sharp ends. Hopefully you've got a nice little star that looks in proportion, and we can pop our beads on later. Now we're on to our little candy cane or Santa sack. For this one here I use about 6 inches of the 20 gauge wire. Again, we start by just making our little loop at the top, wrapping it around our round nose pliers, and then just bringing that end tail piece around the other wire to secure that down. Now we're going to work with our wire to start forming it into that candy cane shape. So I start with just bending this one straight across, just a tiny little bit, and then I can bend it downwards to start to sort of form that capital J shape. Trying to stay about that 1 inch size, bending it around and making a few bends on the spots where you need to form it into that candy cane shape. Once you're happy with your little shape there, you can bring that wire back up to the top and wrap it around the bottom of your loop there just to secure that charm in place. Cutting that tail off and crimping it in nice and tight. Now we're on to our next little charm, which is the little love heart. For this one here, we use about 6 inches of 20 gauge wire. And we start by making our little loop at the top. Again, leaving that little tail straight at the end and wrapping it around our round nose pliers, and then bringing that tail around the other wire just to secure it in place. Then I like to form my little heart with this loop on the top of the side. Again, for this one, just following that sort of 1 inch size, we just start shaping the wire around to start to form the heart shape. Making it down to the bottom, then putting a bend, and then bringing the wire up and around with another bend in the middle there. And then bringing the wire back to the starting point so that you can wrap it around the bottom of that loop at the start. Bringing it around a couple of times, and then you can cut your tail off and crimp it in nice and tight. You can see all these shapes are really nice little simple shapes. You can add your beads or colour onto them. I just use my pliers and work with my wire to make the shapes nice and symmetrical and sort of look how you like them. So I'm just working with my little heart there until it's in proportion and I'm happy with it. Next up is our little icicle. So I've just got a couple of nice little beads here. For this one here, we need about 7 inches of our 20 gauge wire. And I've got 4 beads there as well. Again, with this one, just making our little loop first and then bringing our little tail around the other piece of wire. Now for our little icicle here, we pop all our beads on. I've just got 4 beads, a few different colours and sizes. So I just pop them onto the wire and slide them up near the top. I bring the beads down just a couple of mil there away from the loop, because as we wrap it around they sort of move upwards. But at the bottom here I just bend that wire around the first bead, trying to keep that bead straight. Now we just bring the wire up sort of on an angle around the first bead, and then around that loop in between the 2 beads. And then I bring it around the next bead, and then around that loop in between those beads there, and then up around the next bead, and then around that loop in between the two beads, and then up around that last bead, and then around the bottom of our loop there to secure our little icicle in place. Now last but not least, we've got our cute little snowflake charm. This one's a little bit different, so we need 3 pieces of wire that we wrap together. We need 2 2.5 inch lengths and 1 3.5 inch length of our 20 gauge wire. Then to wrap it all together, we also need 1 5 inch length of 26 gauge wire. So I start with just holding one of the smaller lengths of wire. Then around the middle of it, I'm just going to start to wrap our 26 gauge wire around it. So I just hold the 2 together in the middle and then wrap this around that wire and bring it over itself just to secure that wire on. And we're going to start to make sort of a star shape. So I grab the next piece of our 20 gauge wire and then just holding it on an angle here, and just bring that 26 gauge wire around that wire twice as well. And then we can pop our last piece of 20 gauge wire on, making sure these are nice and even and spaced out to sort of create a little star shape. Holding that last piece of wire on, we just bring the thinner piece of wire around that piece twice as well. And we're just going to move around the whole star, just bringing this wire around 2 times each piece while we're holding it secure in place, wrapping around 2 times on each piece. Trying to hold those wires nice and evenly apart as well while we're securing them in place. Once I've come around all 6 pieces and wrapped around, then I like to actually go back the other way and just go 1 loop around each piece as well, just so that it's really sort of locked in place there. So just come around this side as well. And then once I've come around that way, I just wrap these 2 little end pieces of wire together. Then I cut the tails off and just crimp them down. So you can try and hold your wires out nice and even. You should have 5 that are about the same length and then 1 that's a little bit longer. The longer one's the one we're going to put our little loop on after, and I'm just making sure all the points are evenly spaced out. You can pop whichever beads you like on. I've got one of these light blue clear faceted beads, and then I've got 4 silver seed beads going onto each piece of wire. And then we just grab our little round nose pliers and put a nice tight bend in the end of that piece of wire. That secures your beads on there. And then we just work our way around all of these different points doing the same thing with the beads on. Making sure that you put the beads onto that last one before we put the little loop on. Now onto this last piece of wire here, the one that's going to have your little loop on there. So just pop all your beads on. And then when you've done that, with our little piece of wire here, I just start by bending it one direction. And then I grab it above with my little round nose pliers, and we can just bring that wire around the round nose pliers once and then bring it around between the snowflake and the pliers. Just wrap it around a couple of times, then we can cut our little tail off and crimp it down nice and tight. So there's your little snowflake with your little loop on the top, and that's what goes onto your little wine charm ring. You can take some time with your pliers now just to make sure it's all secure and sitting evenly in how you like it. Now you should have your 6 little wire wrapped charms here. Some of them might need beads if you choose to do that, so I'm just going to show you how I pop the beads onto one of these charms, and then you can go ahead and do the others if you choose to. I use my 26 gauge wire, and I tend to use about 12 to 15 inches per charm. I just start by holding the wire alongside one of the 20 gauge wires on the charm and then just wrapping it around the connection at the top there. Then I just like to bring it around that side wire just once or twice just to secure it on there. And you want your wire coming off sort of on the front side. Then you can pop some beads onto your wire. So I've got these cute little green metallic seed beads, and I'm just going to start to wrap it onto our charm to make it look like a Christmas tree. So you just pop a few beads on there and then bring your wire across to the other side of the charm and wrap it around the other side as well. Popping a few more beads on in between each time you've wrapped it around your charm. I do red and white beads on the candy cane and silver on the heart, but you really can choose whichever ones that you like. These are just really cute little fun Christmas designs. Keep popping those beads on until you're happy with your design, and then you can wrap your wire around at the end and just secure it on there. Once you're happy with all your little charms, you can pop them onto your little wine charm rings. And then everyone's going to know whose drinks are whose at your Christmas party. So there's your wire wrapped Christmas wine charms.